What if the biggest mistake you're making in life is trying to save the wrong people? The truth is brutal. Some people don't want to be saved, and the more you try to help them, the more they destroy your peace, your time, and your future. In the next few minutes, you'll discover the 6 types of people you should never try to rescue, no matter how much you care. Because once you understand this one rule, your life becomes calmer, stronger, and far more powerful if you ever experienced people like this. Comment the word aware below, because awareness is the first step toward protecting your peace. And if you enjoy powerful psychology insights like this, make sure you stay with me, because the next types are even more dangerous. The first type of person you should never try to save is someone who refuses responsibility. These individuals have a deep-rooted habit of blaming everyone and everything for their circumstances, refusing to see their own role in the challenges they face. Whether it is their family, their workplace, or even society at large, they always find an external target for their frustrations and failures. They rarely reflect on their decisions or actions, and instead create narratives that make them the perpetual victim. Trying to help such a person can feel productive at first, especially when you see them struggle or make poor choices, but over time it becomes a draining experience. You might give advice, offer guidance, or provide solutions. Yet nothing sticks, because the core issue is their refusal to acknowledge that they have control over their life. When someone refuses responsibility, they also refuse the most essential tool for personal growth: accountability. Without accountability, change becomes impossible, no matter how much support or guidance you provide. Their resistance isn't always obvious. Sometimes they can appear cooperative or agreeable in conversation, only to revert to the same patterns of blame and avoidance as soon as the pressure of change is removed. This cyclical behavior can be emotionally exhausting for anyone trying to help, because it creates a sense of stagnation and frustration. You begin to feel like you're pouring energy into a black hole, constantly giving, yet never receiving any genuine progress or transformation. Moreover, individuals who refuse responsibility often manipulate guilt to keep others engaged, making you feel obligated to continue supporting them even as it harms your mental and emotional well-being. They are masters of shifting the focus away from themselves and onto those who try to help, subtly insinuating that if they don't improve, it is your fault for not doing enough. Protecting yourself from this type of person requires recognizing the limits of your influence. Compassion does not mean sacrificing your peace, and understanding that some people must face the consequences of their choices without your intervention is crucial. When you accept this truth, you reclaim your energy, set healthy boundaries, and avoid being trapped in endless cycles of frustration and disappointment, ultimately allowing you to focus on your own growth and relationships with people who are willing to take responsibility for their lives. The second type of person you should never try to save is the constant victim. These are individuals who have constructed their identity around suffering and misfortune, and they use this narrative to gain attention, sympathy, or control. A constant victim rarely looks for real solutions to their problems, because the problems themselves serve a purpose. They reinforce their story of helplessness and dependence. When you try to help someone like this, it may seem noble at first. You offer advice, support, and encouragement, hoping that your guidance will inspire change. However, the reality is that the constant victim often resists any form of real progress. They may listen politely, even nod along, but deep down, they are invested in maintaining the cycle of struggle because it defines who they are. Their world revolves around drama, complaints, and blaming others for their circumstances, and any attempt to break them out of this pattern can trigger resistance, defensiveness, or even anger. What makes them especially challenging is that they often project the responsibility for their continued suffering onto you. When things don't improve, they subtly or overtly imply that it is because you didn't do enough or because others around them failed to understand their situation. This manipulative dynamic can leave you feeling exhausted, frustrated, and even guilty for trying to help. Over time, constant victims can erode your self-esteem and emotional stability as you invest more and more energy into efforts that will never yield genuine change. Their focus is never on growth or improvement. It is on perpetuating a story where they remain powerless and others remain responsible for their happiness. Protecting yourself from a constant victim requires recognizing that not all suffering requires your intervention. True change only occurs when someone genuinely wants to alter their circumstances and take responsibility for their life. By setting boundaries and stepping back from people who insist on being perpetual victims, you safeguard your own mental and emotional health. You create space for positive, mutually supportive relationships and ensure that your energy is spent on people who are willing to grow, evolve, and take ownership of their own lives. Understanding this distinction is crucial for maintaining your peace, focus, and long-term well-being. The third type of person you should never try to save is the manipulator. Manipulators are individuals who skillfully control others to serve their own needs, often disguising their intentions under the guise of vulnerability or helplessness. At first glance, they may appear charming, persuasive, or even in need of genuine help, which can trigger your instinct to assist. However, the reality is that manipulators rarely seek real solutions. Instead, they seek control, attention, and compliance. They use subtle tactics like guilt, emotional pressure, flattery, or even silent treatment to influence the decisions and actions of those around them. The danger of engaging with a manipulator is that you often end up prioritizing their needs over your own, losing track of your boundaries and emotional well-being in the process. Every effort you make to help them is often reframed as insufficient, keeping you constantly on edge, trying to fix their dissatisfaction while they maintain complete control over your responses. Manipulators excel at creating dependency, making you feel responsible for their happiness or stability, even when you have done everything within reason. This dynamic can become mentally exhausting because the manipulator rarely shows genuine gratitude or acknowledgement. Instead, they shift blame, twist situations, or reframe events to maintain their advantage. Over time, repeated exposure to this behavior can erode your self-confidence and leave you questioning your own judgment. The key thing to understand about manipulators is that their need for control and influence rarely changes. No matter how much you give, advise, or support them, they are unlikely to alter their behavior unless they consciously choose to do so, which is extremely rare. Attempting to save a manipulator is a cycle of giving without receiving, draining your energy while leaving their patterns intact. Recognizing manipulation early and setting firm, consistent boundaries is essential for protecting your peace. True compassion does not require sacrificing your autonomy or letting someone exploit your goodwill. By stepping back from manipulators, you maintain clarity, protect your emotional health, and create space to invest in relationships with people who are genuine, responsible, and capable of reciprocal care. Understanding this allows you to conserve your energy for those who truly value your help and presence. The fourth type of person you should never try to save is someone who repeatedly betrays your trust. Trust is one of the most valuable elements in any relationship, and when it is broken once, it can sometimes be forgiven. However, when a person repeatedly lies, deceives, or betrays you, it becomes a clear pattern rather than an occasional mistake. People who betray trust repeatedly rarely feel genuine remorse, and their actions often signal that they prioritize their own needs, desires, or convenience over the integrity of the relationship. Trying to save someone like this is a dangerous and exhausting endeavor because no matter how many chances you give them, the cycle continues. You might find yourself constantly defending them, making excuses for their behavior, or trying to convince yourself that they will change. But these efforts rarely lead to meaningful transformation. Repeated betrayal often creates an invisible weight on your mental and emotional state, as you struggle to balance your hope for change with the reality of their behavior. Over time, the constant disappointment can cause anxiety, stress, and a diminished sense of self-worth, because your expectations for honesty and respect are continually violated. Additionally, staying in a relationship with someone who repeatedly breaks your trust can distort your perception of healthy boundaries, making it harder for you to recognize and protect yourself from toxic behavior in the future. The most important thing to understand is that loyalty and forgiveness have limits. When someone chooses to betray you over and over, it reflects a fundamental unwillingness to respect the bond you share. Their repeated choices reveal their true priorities, and no amount of effort on your part can force them to value honesty or commitment. Protecting yourself means acknowledging that trust is earned through consistent, reliable actions, not promises or occasional apologies. By stepping back and refusing to continually save someone who betrays your trust, you reclaim your emotional energy, establish boundaries, and allow yourself to build relationships with people who demonstrate genuine integrity. Accepting this truth is empowering because it shifts the focus from trying to fix someone else to nurturing your own well-being and investing in relationships that are reciprocal, honest, and truly supportive. The fifth type of person you should never try to save is the energy vampire. These individuals drain the mental, emotional, and sometimes even physical energy of everyone around them, often without realizing it, or in some cases, intentionally. They are constantly negative, complaining, or embroiled in drama, and their presence can leave you feeling exhausted, frustrated, or overwhelmed. Energy vampires often thrive on attention and emotional reactions from others, using conflict, manipulation, or constant neediness to keep people engaged with their problems. When you try to save or help an energy vampire, it may seem productive at first because you're offering support, listening to their concerns, or attempting to guide them towards solutions. However, the nature of an energy vampire is that they rarely, if ever, take proactive steps to change their circumstances. They are invested in maintaining a state of emotional dependency, which ensures that others continue to provide attention and care without receiving anything meaningful in return. Over time, consistently engaging with an energy vampire can erode your patience, emotional stability, and even your motivation for self-improvement. You may notice that after interactions with them, you feel drained, stressed, or burdened by feelings that aren't truly your responsibility. Unlike people who genuinely struggle but are willing to take action to improve, energy vampires reject solutions or positive changes because doing so would reduce the control they have over the emotional environment around them. They often resist encouragement, advice, or suggestions, and may even react negatively if someone tries to set boundaries. Trying to save them often becomes a repetitive cycle of giving, feeling exhausted, and being manipulated emotionally, which ultimately achieves nothing in terms of real change. Protecting yourself from energy vampires requires recognizing that your emotional energy is finite and valuable. Setting firm boundaries, limiting interactions, and disengaging from unnecessary drama is essential. True compassion does not require sacrificing your well-being for someone who continually drains it. By stepping back from energy vampires, you preserve your mental clarity, maintain your emotional health, and create space for relationships that are mutually supportive, positive, and growth-oriented, ensuring that your time and energy are invested wisely. The sixth type of person you should never try to save is someone who refuses to grow. Growth requires self-awareness, humility, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about oneself, but some people choose comfort in their destructive habits instead. They resist feedback, reject advice, and cling to the same patterns of behavior that cause them harm or hold them back. When you try to help someone like this, your efforts are often wasted because they are not interested in genuine change. They may listen politely or nod in agreement, but their actions rarely align with their words, and they continue repeating the same mistakes over and over. Trying to save a person who refuses growth can be incredibly frustrating and exhausting because you are essentially pushing against a locked door. No matter how much guidance, support, or resources you provide, progress is impossible unless they make a conscious choice to take responsibility for their own development. This type of person often rationalizes their behavior, blames external circumstances, or deflects responsibility, creating a cycle in which their habits remain unchallenged. Your repeated attempts to fix them can lead to resentment, frustration, and even self-doubt because you begin to question why your efforts are not producing results. Moreover, staying engaged with someone who refuses growth can prevent you from focusing on your own progress and surround yourself with people who are willing to evolve. Protecting yourself means accepting that not everyone wants to change, and that change cannot be forced. True help only works when the other person is ready and willing to do the work themselves. By stepping back from those who refuse growth, you reclaim your energy, maintain your focus, and create space for relationships that are reciprocal, supportive, and aligned with mutual development. Recognizing this reality is empowering because it shifts your attention from trying to save someone else to prioritizing your own growth, peace, and long-term well-being, ensuring that your efforts are invested where they can actually make a difference and produce meaningful results. The seventh type of person you should never try to save is someone who consistently undermines your boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that protect your mental, emotional, and physical well-being, and they are essential for healthy relationships. However, some people repeatedly ignore, disrespect, or violate these limits, expecting you to accommodate their needs, desires, or demands at the expense of your own. When you attempt to save or help such individuals, it can feel like a noble act at first because you genuinely want to support them, but over time it becomes damaging and exhausting. These individuals often disregard your time, energy, and personal space, pushing you to bend or compromise repeatedly. They may use guilt, manipulation, or emotional pressure to convince you to prioritize their problems over your well-being, making it difficult to maintain your own stability. When boundaries are continually ignored, you begin to feel drained, resentful, and trapped because your efforts to help are not met with respect or reciprocity. Unlike people who genuinely struggle but respect the help offered to them, those who disregard boundaries rarely recognize or value the limits you set. Instead, they interpret your compassion as an opportunity to further their own agenda, keeping you locked in a cycle of giving without receiving any meaningful change or appreciation. Protecting yourself from these individuals requires clarity, firmness, and consistency. You must recognize that setting boundaries is not selfish, it is a necessary act of self-preservation. True compassion does not involve sacrificing your health, peace, or dignity for someone who refuses to respect your limits. By refusing to save those who repeatedly violate boundaries, you protect your energy and create space for relationships with people who are capable of mutual respect, accountability, and personal responsibility. Understanding this dynamic allows you to focus on meaningful connections rather than draining cycles of obligation and manipulation. When you prioritize your own boundaries, you not only safeguard your well-being, but also set a standard for the type of relationships you allow into your life, ensuring that your energy is invested in people who value, respect, and grow alongside you. The eighth type of person you should never try to save is someone who consistently chooses chaos over stability. These are individuals who thrive on drama, conflict, or constant upheaval, and they seem unable or unwilling to create a balanced, peaceful life for themselves. Their choices are often impulsive or self-sabotaging, and they may repeatedly make decisions that lead to emotional, financial, or relational turmoil. When you try to save someone like this, it can feel noble at first, as though your support or guidance might finally help them find stability. However, their patterns are rarely accidental. The chaos is part of their identity, and they are often resistant to change. No matter how much advice you offer, how many solutions you suggest, or how much time and energy you invest, they frequently revert to the same destructive habits. People who consistently choose chaos often resist responsibility for the consequences of their actions, instead blaming external factors, other people, or circumstances. They may seek temporary comfort or sympathy from those around them, creating a cycle where others are drawn into their turmoil and asked to fix what they refuse to manage themselves. Engaging repeatedly with someone like this can drain your energy, disrupt your focus, and even affect your mental health, because the chaos they generate often spills over into your life. Trying to save them creates a dynamic where you are perpetually responding to emergencies that they themselves could prevent, which can lead to frustration, resentment, and burnout. Protecting yourself from these individuals requires recognizing that their choices are ultimately their own responsibility. You cannot force someone to abandon chaos if they are unwilling to do the work of creating stability. True compassion involves setting boundaries, stepping back, and allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their decisions, rather than sacrificing your own peace in an attempt to control or fix their life. By refusing to save someone who consistently chooses chaos, you preserve your energy, protect your mental and emotional health, and create space for relationships with people who are capable of stability, growth, and mutual respect, ensuring that your efforts and attention are directed toward positive, constructive connections.